Too many people in America fear their government, and the government is being run by too many powerful agencies like the IRS and others. I think it's time the people take the country back through their representative government.
Hey, Mr. Politician, living on that hill, living in that life of luxury on We the People's Bill. Don't have a clue how the other half lives, and that is a shame. It's time to stop the tyranny. You keep pushing through your bills, calling for revolution, going for it now. It's time to save our Constitution while we still got the guns in our hands.
Hi, I'm Renee Kimball, and welcome back to Freedom TV. We've got a show for you today that's going to be very, very important to your future. It's all about water and saving rainwater and how to harvest it. Here in the Northwest, that sounds maybe like a kind of a redundancy, but believe me, it's going to be very, very important in the future. So stick with us and you're going to hear the real scoop. But first, of course, we're going to go to Chris Janowski and our regular segment of Surviving and Thriving. And this one is going to be on fire and water. I know they're opposites, but he does a good job of putting them together. So we're going to have Chris Janowski, Surviving and Thriving, Fire and Water.
The first step in winter shelter building is usually to build a fire. Always want to do this if you can. It helps keep you warm if you need it, and it's going to generate water for you. You need this water to check dehydration. This is a very, very important thing that you can never forget. Also, the fire is always your friend. After your fire is going, take snow and put it in a piece of cloth. Again, here we've got a parachute cloth small bag that we take with us always in the winter just to make a water generator. You're going to take the snow and really work it again, pound it, make sure it's real condensed. Once you're satisfied with it, try to get the bag as full as you can. Take it and hang it near the fire. What I want to caution you with here is you don't want to hang it too close to the fire. We don't want to burn the bag. You do this properly, in just a few minutes you'll start to have water, and it'll be an endless supply of water for you as you work. Here we're going to build a lean-to type winter shelter, and the first thing we have to do is know how to lash properly. Tie a piece of 550 or some other strong cord to one of the poles that you want to lash and start to wrap in this fashion. To make a proper lash, it's two parts. This is the first part, which are called wraps. You want to get these as snug as you can, but you don't have to get too out of control. You want to go around each limb at least 3 times. This will give you your maximum strength for whatever type of cord you're using without wasting too much cord. This part here is what's called a frap. We go between the poles now And this one we really want to tighten up very, very hard. Again, go around 3 times at least. And then you're just going to want to tie this off with a square knot. As you can see, this is a very strong setup. As you can see, the water generator is already starting to produce for us. This is a nice way to make a makeshift collector out of a baggie. A couple of logs to hold it up. It works just nice. Notice the distance that we've got the generator from the fire and how small the fire is at this point. We don't need any more heat or to get any closer to that fire. We don't want that bag to burn. This type of shelter can be built in a pretty short order of time. You can see how simple the original structure is. We've got 2 poles down at a 45 leaning against one that goes across 2 trees. As we put the side verticals in, they support the cross members that go on the top. That is our superstructure. Pretty fast, pretty easy. Take small pieces of spruce now and lay them on the top with the butts up. The branches will catch on the cross members and make a nice solid dwelling. You're going to need quite a bit of spruce to do this, and all in small pieces. You're going to want to make it so almost you can't see light through it anymore. You'll want to do the same thing on the sides. And again, close it in so almost you can't see any light at all. Take the time to drink the water. It'll save your life. All that's left for you to do now is cover the top and the sides with snow. This time you don't have to be very particular with the consistency of the snow because you've got a structure that's going to remain under it. You can use large chunks, and large chunks work really nice for building a vertical side. Also, some large chunks on the top really don't matter, and they don't want to fall through the spruce boughs.
Hi, welcome back to Freedom TV. I'm Renee Kimball, and today with me is Ole Erson. And thank you very much for coming back, Ole. I really appreciate it. I keep looking at your website going, oh, he has to come back and talk about that too. And finally, you came back to talk to us about rainwater harvesting. Mm-hmm. Now, here in the Northwest, rainwater harvesting seems like, what are you, stupid? It's like we don't see the sun for 6 months out of the year. Why on earth would anybody want to harvest rainwater here in the Northwest?
Well, it's an abundant resource, of course, in the wintertime here, and there are many reasons to want to harvest rainwater. Let me give you a few of them. One, of course, self-reliance. Water resources are becoming scarce worldwide now, and it's becoming a critical resource. The tap could be shut off at any time. Where will you be when that happens?
Right.
Probably not going to happen, but it's a kind of an insurance policy. Second is rainwater is unexcelled water quality. It's
Oh, really?
probably the most pristine water source there is available naturally. It's got very few dissolved elements in it. It's almost like distilled water. And it's, of course, very, very top quality compared with many of the surface water resources that are tapped for human use from lakes and rivers and so forth.
Right, especially considering I went to a course called Water 101 with the city of Portland, and they were talking about, oh well, we'll just build these cisterns and we'll filter the water from the Columbia River, and I'm going, I don't think so.
Or can consider the Willamette
Yeah, it's
River.
like,
We're downstream
no, it's
from
like-
so many industrial uses.
Yeah.
So, so rainwater's excellent water quality, and it's such an abundant resource. Why not use it? It's very inexpensive to use it, and you know what? It's really fun.
Really?
To do a rainwater system. So
Yeah.
we'll get into some of the details about
Great.
harvesting rainwater.
Right. One of the questions I've always had about rainwater, is there any difference in the acidity of rainwater compared to like tap water or filtered water?
Well, it totally depends on the area that the rain falls in. If you live in an area with a lot of atmospheric pollution containing sulfur, for example, the rainwater can pick up those sulfur compounds and
Right.
develop sulfuric acid, which is what acid rain is.
Acid rain,
Acid
yeah.
rain, right. Now, we live in an area where there's very little industrial pollution, industrial air pollution, and in fact, most places on the planet, there are not a lot of polluting sources. But that can be an issue.
Right, say in like China, in Beijing, probably not the best place in the world to be harvesting rainwater.
Probably not.
Yeah.
So if you don't have these significant industrial pollution sources, water is about neutral pH,
Really?
generally speaking, right? So it's not only low in pollutants, but the acidity and alkalinity is right there in the middle.
Right, excellent. Well, I know we have some pictures, and I know the first picture coming up is my favorite picture, and it's on your website. And I just love this picture. I go, I want to live there. And this is really your house? This is what it looks like?
That was our house. Now, we've moved from that
did you?
place, right? Now we're living
Okay.
in an eco village at this point, but
Oh,
that
okay.
was the first place we did rainwater
Oh,
harvesting.
there it is. I just love
Okay.
this. I just think this is incredible.
So this is the central east side of Portland.
Really?
We're about 20 blocks from downtown where this is here.
No kidding.
And we were doing all kinds of experimental technologies there in addition to rainwater harvesting, but rainwater harvesting was one of the first things we did and one of the funnest things we did too.
Right. Okay, and the next one is we're getting into it, and this is actually looking at the storage unit.
So here's our backyard, and we have a 1,500 gallon cistern
Whoa.
that we spent about $400 for. And for us, for our family of 5 at the time, we were 5 living in this dwelling, that was almost a month's water supply.
Really?
And the amazing thing is, with our 30 to 40 inches of rain each year in Portland, the tank would fill up in just a few hours of heavy
Really?
rain. Yeah.
And so that a month's worth of supplies in a tank that size. Are we talking about all of your water supplies?
That was running our entire household,
Really?
including our toilets, drinking, showering, bathing, and laundry.
And laundry.
Laundry.
Everything.
Now, I have to admit, we're very frugal
Yeah.
in our use of resources.
Right.
So compared with the typical American user, we
Right.
probably were using a fraction of that. But so for a typical American user, 1,500 gallons might last a half a month. Depends on how many people you have living in the household.
Right.
But for our household of 5, with our consumption of about 15 gallons per person per day, this supplied us for about 1 month.
1 month. And how big was that?
That was a 1,500
And
gallon
I mean,
tank.
what's the actual size
Oh,
of it?
it's about 5.5 feet high, about 7 feet in diameter.
Okay, so it's fairly good size.
Right, it's a fairly good size.
Now, what are these little guys here?
So here on the left is a reduced pressure backflow prevention device. So when we got our permit from the city of Portland, we were the first to be permitted to harvest rainwater in the city.
Really?
One of the critical issues was since we also used the city water, particularly in backup during the summer, or if we had a prolonged drought in the winter where we had no significant rainfall for a month, we would go back to using city water. So the city water supply was connected to our rainwater supply. And in that case, the city of Portland is very particular. They want you to put a device in which isolates your water supply from the city's water supply. So rainwater couldn't potentially enter into the public supply system.
Because we know you're responsible, but hey,
somebody else might do it wrong.
Somebody else might do it wrong.
Or if exactly. So on the right of those two pictures there, and you don't actually need to see that, but that was the rainwater machine, So it consisted of a pump, some filters to filter our water. We had a sterilizer that used ultraviolet radiation to sterilize the water and kill any potential bacteria. Now keep in mind, the water's falling on your roof, and there could be bird droppings, there could be dust or leaves coming in from a tree.
Here, it sort of shows you
yes,
the whole...
this actually is the schematic of the water supply system. So you can trace the path of the water from the roof down through the downspouts into the cistern, and then in our basement we had our rainwater machine, which consisted of pressure storage tank, a pump, 2 filters, 20 and 5 micron filtration, and then the ultraviolet sterilizer.
Right, so it actually went into the cistern before it went into the sterilization process.
Exactly, right, exactly right, yeah.
Great.
So the water was stored unsterilized in the tank outside.
Okay, that makes sense. And then our next one, we have...
So here are some pictures now of the devices that are part of the rainwater system. So on the left is what's called a roof washer. So think about it for a moment. A roof washer. Now think about it for a moment. So the water's landing on your roof. If you haven't had a rain for a while, there may be dust on the roof or bird droppings or potential contaminants. So the first time it rains, for the first few minutes, your rainwater is going to be more full of potential pollutants than after it's been raining for a while. So the concept of a roof washer is to waste the first 10 gallons or so of water.
And
now, it depends on exactly right. So that first initial flow with the dust in it is diverted away from the cistern. That keeps pollutants out of your cistern.
Oh, okay.
It's a very simple device, and there are different ways of accomplishing that, but it tends to increase the purity of the water in your tank.
Right.
So on the right side of the picture, we can see the cistern and the pipe going into that.
Okay, and the next one is...
Okay, so now these photos here are of some experiments we did in an attempt to create sculptures. Now you have falling water, so water can be very beautiful as it flows downhill.
Excellent.
So if you can make it visually interesting, it's like your rainwater system is not only functional, but it's art too. So that's part of the fun of the project is putting a water sculpture on the side of your house. Now, we did our water system right outside our dining room window. So whenever it rained, we would love to go and watch the water flow through the different pipes. It was really fun.
That's excellent. What a lot of fun. Now, these are some examples of different ways, storage tanks, different kinds of storage tanks.
So here you have rain barrels. Okay, so our system was kind of a glorified rain barrel system. Instead of a rain barrel of 50 gallons or so, we had 30 times that capacity. And by increasing our capacity, we were able to actually run our entire household on rainwater. If you have a rain barrel, it isn't quite as utilitarian because you would use it more for outdoor purposes. But the system is much, much simpler. You don't require sterilization or filtration. It's really, really simple.
So this would be mainly just for like watering the garden or, you know, washing the car, things like that.
Washing your vegetables that you bring in, exactly.
Okay,
right.
good, excellent.
Now, one type of rain barrel system can be very, very useful at even for daily or almost daily use, and that is using a rain barrel to run your washing machine.
Oh.
Okay, so rain comes for us primarily in the fall, winter, and spring season. In many places it comes year-round, and so if you have a sufficiently sized cistern, you can run your house completely off of rainwater.
Wow.
Here we're challenged in the summer because our summers are so dry.
Right.
But one way to actually use rain practically year-round is to do your laundry with it, or to flush toilets. And you can avoid the complexities of tanks and things like that by doing gravity feed from a rain barrel into your basement to a toilet or a washing machine, for example.
Excellent.
Very, very low cost for your system, and yet you get potentially thousands of gallons of water use each year.
And so what we just saw were some larger barrels, and these are even larger barrels. These look like the cisterns that you were talking about.
So this is for the serious rainwater
serious
harvester,
rainwater
right? So our tank would be like the one in the lower right. So you can see there are much larger tanks.
Yeah.
Our system was 1,500 gallons. That one in the center is probably 5,000 or possibly even 10,000 gallons.
And so something like that could, possibly last you 6 months.
Yes, exactly right.
Wow.
I met a man in Newburgh who lived on a 500-foot hillside, and to get water there, the residents were typically drilling 500 or 1,000-foot wells. He was facing the potential costs of tens of thousands of dollars to drill a well. So he thought, why not put in a rainwater harvesting system? He put in 20,000 gallons of capacity, and not only ran his household, but ran his summertime garden. That's probably one of the most exceptional systems I've seen locally. But the cost was less than a conventional drilled well. So depending on your particular application, rainwater harvesting can be very, very economical compared with alternatives.
I think we got one more here. This is our last picture, and this is, again, just different plastics. Is there any difference in the plastics?
Most of the plastics are polyethylene plastic, which is potable water consumption. You know, we can drink the water. It's kind of like milk jugs. It's a glorified milk jug. So the water is entirely safe to store in this plastic cistern. And if you have sufficient quantity, you can run a year-round rainwater system.
Year-round rainwater. Well, those are great examples of different types. Because when I first started looking into this, I had the concept of rain barrels, and that, nothing quite that large came to mind. Now, you were going to tell me about, there's two systems. I thought there was only like one way of doing this.
Okay.
So there's different
Let me
kinds
talk
of ways.
about two systems that I've implemented. Okay, we had two different applications, for two different house sites. So in our inner city Portland site, we're connected to the grid. We have public water from the city of Portland.
Right.
And we wanted to run our house for most of the fall, winter, and spring seasons. In the summertime, we depended on city water for irrigation. But we had city water backup in case our rainwater was exhausted.
Right.
Now, our system cost about $1,500. We had a pump, we had the sterilizer, we had filters, and we had the backflow prevention device, and this was permitted by the city. And so in summary, it was a single tank, grid connected, and for sterilization we used ultraviolet sterilization. The second system we did was on a hillside where we could use gravity feed instead of having a pump available to us all the time. So in this off-the-grid system, our electricity was supplied by a generator. And when you have a generator, you usually want to turn it on for a while and then turn it off. You don't want to run it 24 hours if you can. The first system that I described took advantage of grid electricity, so we could use our pump at any time. So the second system consisted of two tanks. The first tank was lower than the second. It was filled by the roof, and when that tank was full, we would turn the generator on, pump the water from the lower tank to a tank higher on the hillside, filter it at the same time. So this was a batch method. Okay, so we had two tanks, and we would run the generator for an hour or so, pump the water from the lower tank to the upper tank, and then we didn't need electricity at that point because the water could flow back to the house by gravity.
Now, would there have been any advantage in filling the tank farther up the hill, or was it just not a suitable location to do that?
No, that's exactly why we use the uphill location for gravity feed. Okay, so when you go up in elevation and you remain at the same location where you're using the water, the pressure gets higher.
Oh, I see.
You see?
Oh,
okay. So we had. It's kind of like putting your water in a water tower.
Oh, okay.
Okay. So we exploited the slope of the hillside to have two different tanks at different elevations, which would allow us to use gravity feed for our water.
Right.
Okay.
So it was cheaper to do it that way, in energy-wise, to put it into the lower tank and pump it up.
Exactly.
And then gravity feed
Right,
down.
right. Because
Right.
after we pumped the top tank, electricity wasn't needed
Right.
at that point. So we wouldn't need to turn the generator on. We'd have 24-hour water.
Right.
Okay,
Excellent.
okay. Now, you wonder how we would sterilize the water in
Yeah, I
that
was
case.
kinda
Okay,
going,
because our first system had a ultraviolet sterilizer that was powered 24 hours of the day. Again, is a complexity
Yeah.
if you're off the grid. You don't
Right.
want to be running something
Right.
unless you actually need to use it.
And that was enough to kill whatever.
Yes, exactly. We tested the water frequently and found that it had no polluting bacteria.
Now, I
in it.
understand there was a little, shall we say, upsetment with the city when you started doing
Yes,
this.
well, when we first implemented the system, we had no idea that the city would require a permit for something like this, so we just went ahead and did our system.
no.
Okay, now what happened was we stopped using city water. And when the city got wind of this, they figured, oh, the water meter must be broken because here's this household running and the meter's staying at the same number. So,
Okay.
and so imagine our surprise when we opened our water bill, and here we are, we have a water meter on our rainwater system, so we know exactly how much water we're using. That's part of the fun of it. And then the city gives us a bill for 100 times what our water meter said. So we called the city and said, what's going on? You're billing us for all this water that we haven't used. And they explained the situation, that the water meter must be broken because it's not registering any consumption. Well, we said we're using rainwater. That's the reason.
And then everybody exploded.
So at that point, we discovered we needed to get a permit. We actually went through the process and worked with some great city officials who addressed the issues and eventually got us a permit, and everything worked out fine in the end.
Now, there's a ballot measure, actually, on the ballot this November that exempts building projects up to $35,000 from building permits. So would that have exempted you, do you think?
Probably not, because the city of Portland codes might supersede that. Now, if that law supersedes Portland codes, then it could potentially could do that.
Bonus! Everybody can put in water systems.
Right.
Excellent.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And so now you've moved from the old place to the new place, and this is. I want to have you back on again. I'm going to keep dragging you on the show about once every 4 months to talk about the village that you've got.
Right. So we're now living in an eco village of
Eco-village.
32 units. We amazingly have an 11,000 square foot roof. There's much more roof area than I've ever had. So 11,000 square foot, which is about 300,000 or 400,000 gallons of water fall on this roof each year. So we can't wait to get into rainwater harvesting mode. Unfortunately, right now we're preoccupied with getting the units fixed up so that they're livable and doing some common rooms and things like that. But eventually we plan on doing a large rainwater harvesting system. We'll probably have some of those cisterns of 5,000 or 10,000 gallons that you saw in your illustrations there.
Excellent. Well, when we come back from our little break, we're going to talk a little bit more about this because I'm fascinated by this. I just think this is the best thing since sliced bread. I really do. Wow, rainwater, cool. We're going to have a little break right now, and we're going to go to a video called What If? And this is about the Delphian School, which is just outside Sheridan, and it's kind of an exciting way of educating kids, and they have incredible successes with kids going on to be some pretty high-powered people. So we're going to take a short break and look at What If?
What if your child could attend a school that focused on cultivating a true love of learning? Not just learning for learning's sake, but learning that would be invaluable in tackling life, not just in the future, but right now. What if the school's goal was not about grades, but about gaining a real understanding of any subject matter a student confronts? What if a student actually had to master a concept before he could go on to another? And what if responsibility and personal integrity were not just theoretical, but ideas your child truly embraced? The Delphian School offers a brilliant alternative to today's public education. The study methodologies used address students as individuals and ensure a high level of successful learning with every student. Developed by American philosopher and educator L. Ron Hubbard, these methods empower students by teaching them how to study successfully. Students learn to acquire knowledge for real-world application, giving them a purpose well beyond passing a test. Every course, every project, every activity has a central goal: to give students the ability to apply what they have learned. Delphi also has an extensive reading program that emphasizes literacy and develops a true love and mastery of reading. Through reading hundreds of books, students progress from the simplest ones to books by Thomas Paine, de Tocqueville, Dickens, and Plato. In addition to the usual high school requirements, students take several courses in logic. They learn to evaluate a variety of situations and to reason and correct problems observed. The teaching staff at Delphi has decades of hands-on experience. These uniquely trained individuals are dedicated to building not just better students, but better people. As always, the proof lies in results. Academically, Delphi students typically score several grades above the national average in standardized testing. And after this invigorating high school education, Delphi graduates typically attend their first choice college or university. Institutions like Stanford, MIT, University of Chicago, and Pepperdine. There are also students who leave Delphi and start their own companies. Students like Sky Dayton, the founder of Earthlink, the largest independent internet service provider in the country. Or Steve Anderson, now on his second successful software company. And there are graduates like Arwen Larson, a published novelist who recently sold her first screenplay. A recent Delphi graduate summed it all up in these words as part of his graduation speech.
It's been said that if you give a man a fish, he'll eat for a day. But if you teach a man to fish, he'll never go hungry. Delphi has shown me that you can teach a man to fish and he'll never go hungry. But if you teach a man to learn, he can teach himself how to fish and anything else he wants to do.
What if that were true and our children really believed it? Well, it is true. And the Delphian School exists to make it true for more children every day. This film was created by students in answer to the question, what if you could challenge life? Their answer, at Delphi, you can.
Hi, we're here today with Ole Erson, and we're talking about rainwater harvesting. Ole, you're going to tell us a little bit more about harvesting rainwater, particularly in the areas, like if we have a big storm.
Okay,
what happens?
So a lot of us in the area are familiar with the so-called Big Pipe project, where Portland is spending about $1 billion to prevent sewage from running into the local rivers, which is a big problem in any big storms. So if you harvest rainwater and divert a significant amount of water out of the storm drains, then potentially you help reduce the problem for which the Big Pipe project is designed to solve. So it's kind of another approach to solving the stormwater runoff problem.
Right, exactly. And the cost sounds to be very modest, really, when you think about it.
If you think of the cost of the Big Pipe project, divide $1 billion by the 400,000 people that live in Portland, it comes out to several $1,000s per man, woman, and child. So our household of 5 in inner southeast Portland, we would have had almost $10,000 in resources from this project dedicated to the Big Pipe project.
Right.
And yet our system cost $1,500 and probably was doing a significant amount to divert water away from the storm runoff project.
Has anyone ever asked the question of,
Well, yeah.
I hate to be obvious here,
City
but-
bureaucrats and city engineers are more oriented towards a centralized
Right,
system. They're not
centralizing everything.
really open to decentralized systems, but I just wanted to point that out.
Yeah.
One other advantage of rainwater harvesting is for fire safety issues. So if you live in a remote area, it's essential to save water, particularly if you have a fire. Then you have this reservoir of water that can be used to fight a fire.
Excellent.
In Hawaii, as I understand, this is actually one of the big incentives for having this, because Hawaii is fairly rural on the islands, and it's a big selling point to have large cisterns of water that can help fight fires if that eventuality occurs.
Right, because it's fighting fires in Hawaii. We have cousins who live in Kauai, and fighting fires over there is a little bit different kind of a program
Absolutely,
than here.
absolutely.
A lot harder, because there are not as many roads into areas, and people live in areas where it's awfully hard to get a fire truck in. So.
Now, they have tremendous amount of rainfall in Hawaii, and it's year-round, so
Right.
You wouldn't need a very large cistern to power your household.
Right.
You know, rainwater harvesting is a technology. It's a very good example of an appropriate technology. We discussed this last time, but it's simple and easy to design. It's simple and easy to maintain. It doesn't require engineers or experts.
Right.
You can do it yourself.
Now, in your estimation, I know you've done a lot of these different kinds of things. Would you? I know we had you on for Humanure, and we're actually going to be doing this. This is really cool. We're actually going to be doing one in coordination with our neighbors, because they work out in the
Fantastic.
garden. They have a garden that's close to our backyard, but it's a long ways from their house, and we're going to be working with them to put in a composting toilet. Composting toilets, harvesting rainwaters, and the other things that you've done. Would you consider this one of the first step, easiest things for people to do if they want to go toward total sustainability?
Absolutely, and one of the problems with Humanure is the fecophobia. So a lot of people are hesitant to get their hands dirty in that way, but rainwater harvesting, I mean, it's an easy one to do. It's fun. You can make it artistic. You can make it into a kinetic sculpture if you like. So, yeah, I would think rainwater harvesting is probably one of the first things that you want to do. It's got tremendous visual impact, and you can feel good whenever it rains.
Yeah.
Isn't that
boy,
great?
I'm
Yeah.
saving water. Excellent.
Exactly.
So that it would be a good place for people to really seriously start thinking
Absolutely,
about
yeah. And of
being
course, the
sustainable.
easiest way to get started is to put in a rain barrel.
Just a
And
rain barrel.
virtually anybody can do that. It's very, very simple. And then if you like doing the rain barrel, if you enjoyed that, think about a system to run toilets in your washer in the house. That kind of water doesn't require much processing.
Right.
You don't need filtration or sterilization if you're going to flush your toilet. Portland actually now allows that with either minimal or no permitting required. So the next step, doing laundry, I believe requires a permit. It's a little bit more complicated, but it is another way to get your hands wet, you might say.
Right. Get your hands wet. What kind of an area are we talking about? Like, we have a very tiny house. It's only 840 square feet. Unfortunately, we went the way of rain handlers. So we have rain handlers all around the house. So when it comes down, it just bounces off. So we'd have to reinstitute the gutters.
Yes, yes.
We do have one area, though, that's about, I'd say about 8 or 9 feet that we did have to put a gutter on because it was close to the driveway and there was no overhang. Would that area be enough to supply a couple of rain barrels?
Absolutely.
Really?
Right. You'll be amazed at how much rain falls on a roof, and so the simple formula is it's a volume calculation. So you multiply the area of the roof. That's the horizontal area. So if it's sloped, you don't count the slope.
Right.
You take what's called the footprint, and then you multiply by the amount of rain that you get. So, for example, if you have a 100 square foot roof, which is only 10 by 10. That's like a porch, really.
Oh, really? Yeah.
Okay, that's 100 square feet of roof. If you multiply that by 1 inch of rain, which we can typically get in 24 hours in Portland in a gentle rain, so you've got 1 inch times 100 square feet. That comes out to about 8 cubic feet of water, which is about 100 gallons. So that'll fill your rain barrel twice in just 1 inch of rain off of a tiny, tiny roof area like that.
That's amazing. I didn't realize that you only needed that small of an area.
For a rain barrel, that's very, very adequate. If you're running a whole household, you probably want to channel all of the water that falls on your roof into your cistern.
Right. Now, is there any angle at which that's optimum for like washing the roof? Because I know if it's not very much of a slope, then you're not going to get a real good washing action.
That doesn't
happening.
really make that much difference, no, because the force of the water landing stirs up any dust and it washes it off immediately.
Right,
so
so
but
it's
the
just
slope
the force of
the
it.
slope of the roof really doesn't make that much difference.
Okay, so it could be.
Could be
we
very,
have
very
we have
steep.
two roofs, one coming down like that, and then a porch roof, which is at a considerably less of an angle.
Well, you can even
than a
harvest
roof.
rain off of a totally flat
Really?
roof. Yes. In fact, that's probably we in this country are some of the few people on the planet that use sloped roofs. Usually, most people on the planet want flat roofs because if you have a flat roof, you can use it for all sorts of activities such as drying foods and hanging your laundry and things like that.
Right. Well, that's incredible.
And they harvest their water typically too.
And they harvest. So this is something that's done around the world.
All over the world, yes.
Really?
In
How come
fact,
we're so far behind the 8 ball
you know,
here?
technology has sort of gotten in the way of us using these old-fashioned, simple technology. You know, high-tech has really superseded low-tech. You know, we're
Right.
so enamored of high-tech systems,
Yeah.
and people are rediscovering the joys of lower technology and the beauties of lower technologies.
Yeah, I mean, there's no system that's high-tech, well, unless you get into the megabucks folks, where you can actually see the water going through your system.
Absolutely.
Whereas with rainwater, you can actually build it so you can, oh look, waterfall, which would be kind of cool. So this is not going back, but going forward and kind of skipping over a little bit of the enamorization of just out
It's
of
kind
sight, out
of
of mind.
rediscovering the simple joys of falling rain.
Yeah, which is, I don't know about you, probably not you, but me, I've just been feeling kind of wound up lately with all of the news and all of the wonderful bailout information.
Yes.
And just going, I'd like to go look at a waterfall now. Can I just go look at a waterfall and feel good? Because this is just getting back to slowing down a little bit and getting a little bit back more under control with what's going on in our lives. Well, we're going to come back in a few minutes. And you out there in the viewing audience, if you have questions for Oli, now's the time to find out anything you want to know about rainwater systems, because you've got the chance of somebody who has been there, done that with both the city and 2 systems. So we're going to take a short break, and we're going to go to, I have forgotten. Oh, we're going to talk about the SMART solution. This is an alternative, and all you younger folks, have a look, because there's no guarantee that your Social Security is going to be there, because there's nothing in law that says they have to give it to you. So have a look at the 7.65% solution, the SMART Act.
They tell me I was born with it.
They say I'm gonna die with it.
They promised my children would be free of it.
It's only gotten worse.
Today's young Americans have inherited the single greatest financial debt in history, over $13 trillion in unfunded Social Security benefits. In 1950, the fatally flawed system of Social Security functioned with a ratio of 16 workers supporting each retiree. Today, there are 3. For our children, there will only be 2.
We will be the first generation to leave the children and the grandchildren worse off than any other generation.
These poor little innocent children coming into the world now shouldn't have to pay off our debts.
We're going to be basically living off the backs of our children and our grandchildren forever, and they're going to be paying into a system that's going to have absolutely nothing left for them.
But there are some things that you don't compromise, and I think the children's future is one of those things.
Instead of preparing for this long-predicted crisis, Congress has spent more than 20 years raiding the Social Security surplus to pay for other government programs and pork barrel projects.
I'm sick to death of people stealing my money, and that is how I look at it. I look as if I've been stolen from.
The money is not there, it's being taken, and come 15 years from now, we are going to have a serious deficit.
Well, I don't want future generations to be blaming me for the debt that's going to be heaped upon them.
We need to do it for our children's sake. We would not rob from their savings account on a day-to-day basis to buy the groceries, but that's basically what we're doing with Social Security right now.
While Congress continues to ignore the impending Social Security crisis, the burden continues to grow. Every month that goes by without a solution, the system goes $50 billion deeper into debt.
If we don't do something immediately, these problems are going to be almost insurmountable.
We can't fix it 10 years from now, it'll be worse. We can't fix it 15 years from now, it'll be even worse than that.
I'm hoping it's not too late for my generation to do something to help my children and my grandchildren, but I fear that if we don't do something quickly, it is too late to help them.
What if there was a courageous solution to the Social Security crisis? Would Washington even listen?
I will listen to any proposal that might be put up.
I would listen because it affects my children and my grandchildren's future.
I promise you that I will listen.
I can assure you I'll be listening.
We'll listen.
We will listen.
I will be very willing to listen to any solution to solve these problems with Social Security. I think it's important for our future, I think it's important for our children's future, and it's important for the health and well-being of our country.
Welcome back. Ole, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about that. You mentioned that you're starting the Eco Village. What are some of the differences between having like a single family operation going on with harvesting rainwater and the multi-family situation that you're talking about with the Eco Village?
Well, the biggest is the regulatory structure. So currently, I don't believe it's allowed to do rainwater harvesting in a multi-family development.
Really?
To use the water inside the dwelling. So of course you can use it for irrigation.
Right.
If all you're doing is using the water that falls on the roof to irrigate your property, I don't think you need any permits at all. You just need to save that water and divert it into wherever you want to use it. If you're going to use it inside a dwelling, commercial or multifamilies are governed by different regulations than single family and duplexes.
Really?
In the city right now. Why the bureaucrats chose to make that the case, I don't know, but I mean, clearly with many families living next to each other, there are potential hazards that you wouldn't necessarily have in single or two-family houses. But nobody's ever done this before, so it's going to be experimental, it's going to be groundbreaking again to implement some kind of system that uses water inside. What we want to start with, since we have 32 units, each unit having its own toilet, we want to flush all our toilets with rainwater.
Right.
And the city is open to doing that. It's just that nobody's ever done it before
Right.
in a multifamily structure before. So we'll probably be pioneering this
Excellent.
and this
Excellent.
effort.
So there's 32 units. Are they like apartments?
There are 32 apartments, right?
Okay.
32 one-bedroom apartments. So we live there, and we have our own office there. We also have a common room, and we're developing one unit as kind of a hostel-style accommodation. So we'll be renting beds on a week-to-week basis.
Excellent.
So if people want to stay and visit guests in the Eco Village, they'll have their own rented
Little
space.
place to
yeah,
stay.
a little place
Oh,
to
how
stay.
cool.
Yeah.
Excellent. Well, I think we have a call. Do you have a question for Ole?
I'd like to find out about how long water can be stored. I'm mostly interested in irrigating during the end of the summer,
Yes, you certainly can. There's one thing to keep in mind, though. When you're storing water for a long period of time, you need a large storage reservoir. That's actually the most costly part of a rainwater harvesting system. Typically, the cost of storage is about 50 cents per gallon. If you get a good deal, you can get the storage cost down to about 30 cents a gallon. But if you want to save water for irrigating in summer, when you're using really large quantities of water to irrigate outdoors, you could potentially be facing very high costs of storage. That's why I try and emphasize to people, if you want to really use water, you've got to figure out a way to use it during the winter when it falls, and that way you don't have to store so much of it. So irrigation is a great idea, but in our climate system, in our particular climate locale, it's expensive to store up enough water to irrigate your yard year-round.
Right.
Okay, so for example, in our system, we spent about $400 or $500 for a 1,500-gallon cistern. If we had wanted to even run our household during the summertime, we would have needed to triple our tank size.
Wow.
And if we wanted to, in addition, irrigate that beautiful garden you saw, we probably would have had to have the equivalent of 10 tanks.
Oh my
that
gosh.
same size. So the cost of the system would have tripled.
Right. And I think we have another call. Do you have a question for Ole? Yes? Do we have a caller? No. No? Sounds like a caller. Okay, it's the phantom caller. Now, 10 tanks, so it would be 10 tanks the size of the one you have?
Exactly, yeah. If we wanted to run a garden. Because if you're familiar with water in your garden, you know, you're using vast quantities of water over a large area. So when you typically you want to drench your garden, you may need to put an inch of water down, multiply that by the size of your garden, which could easily be much larger than your rooftop area, and you're going to need a lot of water.
Oh, right, and especially in the summertime. So I think, yes, we have a caller. We don't have a caller. We do. Hi. Do you have a question for Ole?
Educating the public has been an ongoing thing when it comes to rainwater. Back in 1988, I came up with this little idea of storm drains. Remind what goes in those drains, right, into streams and rivers. I went to the city of Portland after I got Chevron to purchase all the stencils and the paint, and had the Girl Scouts to stencil storm drains. At the time, the city of Portland didn't think that was a good idea. They had to think about it. So we went to the city of Lake Oswego, and their city council approved it. We did the entire city of Lake Oswego. The only problem was they wouldn't let us stencil a fish on the storm drain because they thought it would offend Christians. So
no. Oh, did we lose you? Yes? Oh, we missed him.
Okay.
Sorry. Okay, well, offend Christians. Okay, a fish. Okay. It shows that you can get into kind of trouble with the bureaucracy, and you've been able to navigate it successfully, which is really cool.
Yeah, you know, but I've gotten a sense that there can be some real difficulties because they're not thinking of, you know, there's oftentimes lacking a common sense approach. We were so fortunate when we did our rainwater system to have a bureaucrat who was totally open to the idea of trying something like this. I think he enjoyed the process himself. He had to problem solve what are the issues here that we need to address. Safety of the water supply, safety of the public water supply, and safety of the household water supply. You see plumbing codes which are observed in Portland and in most areas in Oregon at least, require every plumbing fixture in the house to be supplied with potable water. It's not legal to provide water to your toilet, which is of a lower quality than drinkable standard.
Oh, okay. I don't know. Okay. I'm sorry. I don't know. The only person I've ever seen drink out of a toilet's been a dog. They're not real fussy.
They're not fussy, and they drink out of puddles too, so it's not really an issue. But I mean, that's the sort of bureaucratic thing, though, that you have to get used to, and you have to deal with that when you're trying to get a permit for a system.
Right, and it's just kind of going through the hoops and jumping through it and trying to get the questions answered in a way that they can understand and understand what you're trying to do. Well, it's good that you ran across someone that was really good and amicable to this.
We were so fortunate.
Right, and there's actually, the Recode Portland folks have said that there are more people coming on board who are looking seriously at gray water. There's been kind of an amnesty declared that, okay, if you find anybody who can show us their gray water system, we're not going to, you know, beat them about the head and shoulders. So they're kind of coming to the party and want to see how this can work and how they can work into getting the thing done.
So, you know, we're really fortunate to live in a city as progressive as Portland, because the city bureaucrats, the city officials now are encouraging rainwater harvesting and encouraging all kinds of appropriate and new technologies that haven't been allowed in the past. So we have the Office for Sustainable Development in town here, which is a relatively new, in the scheme of things, department to promote these kind of technologies, green technologies.
Well, I'm just glad there are people like you around who aren't in the government who are promoting them, because this is great stuff and you're showing people that how we can do this. So I really want to thank you for coming on the show, Ole. And I'm sure I'm going to find something else on your website to drag you back in here for, because everything you're doing is just fantastic.
Renee, it'll be my pleasure to come back again and talk some more.
Thanks so much. I really appreciate it. And thank you for joining us today. We really appreciate you being here, because you're a great part of what makes this program happen. Your questions are really important to us because they give us kind of an indication of what do people really want to have the answers to. So if you have an opportunity and you'd like to contact me through either my phone or email address, give me a call, an email, and let me know someone that you've seen who is solving problems out there without going to the government. We'll see you next week. Next week's going to be a very unusual show. We're going to talk about media literacy, so tune in. We'll see you next week for Freedom TV.
I cry for my country, for the pain that it's been through. She's been made to suffer for the profit of a few. Storm clouds are forming, winds of change now touch our shores. Our hear forefathers are crying as the dream's been cruised.